a slightly less than professional live stream, number 47. It's been a while since we've done one of these. There are various reasons for that. One of them was that we had some technical errors on some of them. One of them that I was just feeling completely sort of out of it, really. And, I've noticed that actually not so many people watch these anymore. They used to be quite popular, but I think maybe the time for live streaming on YouTube has maybe past its peak. I don't know. Maybe some of you will have to tell me whether you think that live streams are still worth doing or not. But we've done 47 of them, so we will continue. Tonight's theme is talking about your favourite cars from the 1980s. Because I was born in the sort of the early part of the decade, I do remember a lot of cars from then. In fact, I've driven a lot of cars from them. Never actually owned an 80s car myself. I've got close to it. The oldest car I owned is in 1991. But if you want something like a Maestro or Montego, then you have to go really for the nicer ones, mostly into the 1980s. The sort of last kind of nice Maestros and Montegos finished for the Maestro about 1991, the Montego about 1994. But by that stage, things like the Vanden Plas would be, over. The Vanden Plas were discontinued in 1988. Obviously, if you wanted a Rover ST3, 216 or 213, they finished in 89, and the Vanden Plas was available with those. But we like the Vanden Plas on this channel, don't we, viewers? We like that sort of thing. Let me just bring up the live stream on my laptop here, and bring it up on my other account, and then we'll go over some of the things that people have said so far, which I'm sure that a lot of you will enjoy. The other thing is that Vauxhall in particular was a much bigger brand back then. They were really kind of number two most of the time in this country. Sometimes Austin Rover or Rover Group were in that sort of position, but mainly it was Vauxhall, and they sold so many cars that people loved. People loved the Cavaliers, they loved the Novas, they loved the Carltons and the Senators and everything like that. And the Astras in particular, huge sellers. And the Astra, does it come into the top 10 anymore? Even the new Astra L? Well, no, but regularly in the top 10. And the Belmont, if you remember the Belmont, some of you will. It's a car that's almost forgotten now, but actually it was quite popular really back in the day. Problem was most of those in the 90s and early 2000s were still on my Joyriders. And they weren't worth anything at all. They were just worth absolutely nothing. So that was a bit of a problem. So yes, these kind of big brands then, but we also had other people who were becoming kind of better regarded in this country. Honda were becoming popular. Nissan was very popular, and a lot of other sort of makes now. The Renault 5 was a very popular car over here actually. The Clio is less popular now, but they're still very popular on the continent, for example. Ford, though, of course, were the dominant manufacturer in this country. They sometimes still are, but they jockey with Volkswagen and some other brands for that particular position now. But Ford were enormous, mainly due to marketing, really. They made some really good cars, but their marketing was really spot on for a lot of the time. So let's have a look at some of the things people have said. Paulie Galtieri says, good evening. Good evening to you, sir. Sean Cook says, good evening. It's his favourite era tonight. A lot of you like 1980s cars, don't you? I'm sure you do. DBT says, good evening. And so does Mark from Bad Books. Good evening to you, sir. Sean Cook says he's got the draft Guinness at the ready. That's from Northern Ireland, I believe, so why not? DBT says, my favourite 80s car would be a Volvo 760 Turbo Intercooler. We saw one of those actually in May at the car show in Alton. We might go to that actually again in October. That'll be good. I've also found out that the show that was on yesterday at Swanmore, that's also going to be on in October. And September's looking very busy for me in terms of going to shows still. So we'll have to delay going to some until October, but yeah, we'll give that a try. Why not? Richard Howlett says, good evening. Good evening to you, sir. Stiff Upper Lip says the SF Series Suzuki Swift GTI. Yeah. There's the Cultus in many markets. That is a forgotten car over here now. I do remember them very sort of. Many of them were white, weren't they? A lot of them were white. Sean Cook says the 40 area defined the decade and after a slow start. Yeah, it came out in 82 and it wasn't that popular. The Cortinas actually sold quite strongly whilst they still had a stock of them right at the end. And by 1992, Sierras were really popular actually. Metro started a decade. Yeah, Metro, that was a very big seller back in the day. 405 was unbeatable. They're very good cars actually. I mean, even the little walk around I did of a 405 Le Mans back in April, actually, that was recorded. That actually has had a lot more views than I thought. And the same chap who owns that's got another 405 that I think he's endeavouring to get back on the road. So I think I would like to have a go in that actually whenever that's ready. Right, don't know why people are sending me messages on this. I do apologise. Okay, the Lexus was born, yes, in 89, I think it was. The Lexus was first. I think we got the Lexus LS400 first in 1990. For some reason, they didn't bring the Lexus. I think it was the ES that was the first one that came along with the LS. We didn't get that for a while. Vladimir Politov says, good evening. Good evening to you, sir. Paulie Gaucho says, one car that comes to mind was the Jaguar XJ40, the first new Jaguar in my lifetime. Yeah, it was, really one of the first all-new cars that Jaguar made for a really, really long time, actually. Because the XJ Series 1, 2, 3 were quite similar, really. And the Series 3 lasted with the XJ12 and M66 until 1992, I think. And the XJ40 was meant to be launched around 84, but they kept putting it back a bit. And the last development work on that, I think, was really when Jaguar were independent, actually. They were independent sort of by about 84, I think. DBTs is looking forward to displaying the 940 at Festival of the Unexceptional next week. Yes, that is a sold-out event. The only way you can possibly get there is if somebody doesn't want their ticket anymore and is selling it on one of the Facebook groups. But we've got our tickets of that, so that's fine. Ema L says, my sister had a 740 turbo manual with overdrive in gunmetal grey, and it was a flyer. Yes, the good old red block turbo. That was also, I think, a 760 red block turbo. DBT says, talking of 740, the current time is 7:40. It was a minute ago. Everything cast this evening, everyone. Emo7 says, Emo L says, well timed. Yes, indeed. Yeah, there are lots of, really quite amazing cars from the 1980s, and not just things like Mark II Golfs and, the X1 XR3Is and things like that. There's loads of them that are nostalgic. I mean, Renault 21's quite nostalgic, Renault 9, Renault 11, Citroen Visa. There's just tons of them. I remember when I was growing up. Volkswagen Polo Classic, Volkswagen Jetta. The first car my parents had when I was alive was a 1983 Volkswagen Jetta. They have been sort of put off by a lot of the stuff that they'd had in the 70s, Mark I Cortina, Vauxhall Viva, Triumph Toledo, things like that, which are very nostalgic cars now, but by the sort of late 70s, early 80s, they weren't particularly well regarded, actually. And, somebody recommended my parents took a look at the Volkswagens, and they bought a Mark I Polo, which I think was a facelift, be about 80 to 81, I think that one was. Never saw it. I've seen a picture of it, I think, at some point in my life. But they bought Volkswagens until about 1990 after that. And the 80s was really when Volkswagen in this in this country started to become very, very popular. They became very popular over here about that sort of time, even though the Mark II Polo didn't get servo brakes in right-hand drive until 1990. I've driven a Mark II facelift, so Mark II pre-facelift Polo, which someone in the chat tonight actually owns. He's had it from new. It's I think he's at 36 years. I think he's had it. It's some enormously long amount of time. It's a lovely condition, this car, but the heavy steering and the lack of servo brakes is a bit scary. The post facelift cars do have a brake servo, but brakes still aren't very good. It's like a Nova. The Novas have a brake servo, but the brakes are really shocking in Novas. They are really bad. Like, I almost crashed a Nova when I was driving it because I thought I was straight out of the corner and the car just didn't slow down. You have to press them. The Metro has amazing brakes, actually. They have really good brakes. Steering, though, is a bit heavier in a Metro. The Novas have very light steering. Paulie Galtieri says, Austin Ambassador Van den Pla with no rev counter. Yeah, that's right. Not even a Van den Pla got rev counter, but the Princess 2200 HLS that I drove last year, that doesn't have one either, actually. Still up, so I always wanted a Nova. The problem with Novas now is they're really expensive. There's a chap I know who had desire to get one. I won't tell you which channel he's from, but he really wanted to get a Nova, and he couldn't find one anywhere for the money that he actually could afford. So he didn't buy one. I think he still wants one. Bike says good evening. Good evening to you, Mike. Julian Knight says good evening. Sean Cook says to Paulie Galtieri that his brother owned a 1993 XJ40, and it was exquisite. Yes, I didn't see one today, actually, at that show. There was a couple of very nice XJs, but they weren't XJ40s. Oxy says the 75 V6 or Jaguar X-Type V6. I don't really know, honestly. I don't know. It depends what you want. The 75 is a much larger car than an X-Type, actually. They're both a bit cramped inside. I don't honestly know. And they both suffer from very similar problems with rotting the sills and things like that. Yeah, I don't know. Pass. Both quite soft cars to drive. Paulie Galtieri says he both had two XJ40s. Mark from Babbitt's just talking about his Polo. Yeah, that's on the channel. It's on Sensible Secondhand Classics. Drove it July 2021. It certainly is in a very nice condition, that car. August 1st was an exciting time. Yeah, I remember that, actually. But the reason why that car registrations changed on the 1st of August was because when they first started bringing up the annual plate change in 1963, although not all authorities actually got the annual change until 1965. So you see some cars at shows and things, and I keep trying to put this out to people, that don't have suffixes on the end of the reg plate, even though they're 63 or 64 and the plate's not being changed. Because I don't know why there was an exemption for some local authorities, but it just sort of was, really. But by 65, they all had the plate change, and it had changed in January, and you know, it was around Christmas time, but these dealerships had to kind of get ready for this big new plate change. It was middle of winter, and it's Christmas holidays and things like that, and they weren't really sort of up for it. They thought, well, how about a nice time of year to get that change, about halfway through the year? And they decided, rather than 1st of July, which would have been logical, because that would split the year in half, they went to 1st of August. I don't quite know why they went for that. Maybe it's because of the school holidays. I don't really know, but that's what they did, and it stayed that way. I think it changed in 1998. I think that was about the time they decided they were going to change it. And the first on the new system we still have now, although the registration letters and numbers aren't quite the same. What started, I think, in March '99 with a T plate, I think it was. So that was a short one. But yeah, 1st of August was really, really exciting. It was ever so exciting for so long. You know, and so many advertising campaigns back in the day were about the new registration letter that was coming out. I don't think maybe do that thing anymore. I don't think people are that bothered anymore about that. Where are we? Yes, Vladimir Politov. Several days ago, I saw a very nice Rover 75. The thing is, because I'm in kind of the MG Rover world and have been for some time, and I've driven 75s and ZTs and things like that, like a lot of them now, I don't get really as excited as I should do about stuff like that. A lot of people at shows get really excited about seeing the 75s and things, and 75 is a nice car. The last one I drove was in May. The one I drove was a really nice example. Chap who had it also owned the Triumph Stag that you would have seen on the channel, and both really nice condition, lovely car. I don't know. I've been overexposed, I think, to them, and I have a friend who's had millions of ZTs. I think he owns like 3 or 4 of them at the moment, and they're good cars. They've got problems, but all Rovers have. But I don't know. I don't really notice them in the same way other people do anymore. Maybe that's just overexposure to them, possibly. Steve Roberts says a K10 Micra. Yeah, I've driven a K10 Micra. I drove it actually November 21. That was just after the NEC that I think I drove that. That was actually quite a fun experience. It was a very slow car. They only really marketed the 1 litre and 1.2 in this country. We didn't get the turbos or anything like that. They weren't really seen in the same way as other countries saw them in terms of being a performance car or something. But yeah, well, I've driven a couple of those in my life. One was an auto, one was a manual. This one I drove on tram was a manual, only a 4-speed, and it was incredibly basic. There was no passenger mirror on that. But yeah, still kind of enjoyable, really. Hey, hello, Agent Barry, the guy from City Alpha 5. It says, hello, sir. Good evening, Agent Barry. How is everyone today? Doing all right, thank you, sir. Been doing some more slightly shambolic shuffling, and I've got another shambolic shuffle that I recorded on Friday, actually, to release, I think, on Tuesday. But we've got some more sensible second-hand reviews and a no-budget reviews episode to put up as well, and then obviously next weekend is festival. That'll be an exceptional. Sean Cook says the SD3 Rover 200 was a great release. Yeah, it was a very, very significant car, that actually. The rust proofing was appalling. I'm not sure the image of the car was quite, in the sort of later years, was quite what they were hoping for. But when it was launched, that was seen as a very aspirational type of car. Very much a replacement for the Dolomite and the Acclaim. But the Acclaim really only came with sort of one engine and one power output, whereas the SD3 was released with more engines, and that was a very, very conscious decision by them. Particularly the facelifted ones are really, really nice. I do really like Van der Pla ones, of course. They are the best, of course. But yeah, they're very nice cars to drive, the SD3s. So they don't look like they will be, but they are. They're really nice to drive. Maestros and Montegos are also nice to drive, but there's a different way, really, the SD3. And even the 1.3 is a pretty good engine. Mark from Bad Book says, treat to see a Rover 75 in everyday use. Yeah, they are coming off everyday use for most people now, although there's certain people I could mention right away, some of you would know who do have one of those in everyday use. I saw an MReg R8 200 Cabriolet in British Racing Green being driven by an old chap as his daily in the local area. Thing is about the R8 200 400 is that the spares availability of those is quite good. The club is really good. There's actually, for a car of that age in this country, quite a few of them around. And, Mr. Richardson's very fond of them, so's Ian Seabrook. Loads of us are, and I've had 2 of them myself. They are superb cars. I'm not really a sort of Cabrio type of person, but you do see them, and you can still buy them for temptingly low prices, actually. Although the one that's in the sort of condition that Quentin was by the end, that one, that's worth a lot more money than £1,000. Agent Barry, that guy from SETI Alpha 5, says, my friend had an SD3 and hearing aid beige. a 213 with an automatic gearbox. I think my grandfather had a 213 with an automatic gearbox. I don't know what spec it was, I can't remember, but sometimes my mother used to borrow that off him. I used to go in that occasionally. It wasn't the last car he had, but he had a couple of Metros, I think, and then he had an SD3, then he got a Fiesta. But yeah, he also always drove automatics, my grandfather. My Polish grandfather rather than my other grandfather, who was one of the little maestros. Yeah, yes, yeah, 213 would have handled well. Agent Barrett says he later had an R8 214. Should let me have a go in. Yeah, even the 214 R8s are pretty good, to be honest. Step Up says the Rover 800 series. Yes, we do like those. The biggest problem with the 800 series, I'm not talking about reliability because that was a bit patchy at times, is the steering. The steering, both of them I've driven, the steering is just way too light. Much too light. Particularly the Vitesse Turbos that I drove. And that still had really light steering in it. You know, if you're a motorway traffic car driver and you have one of those, you just have to get used to the steering. There wasn't really any feel in it. I don't know whether you could get, you know, something to sort that out a bit, but I just found that a little bit sort of strange, personally. Yeah, I'd like to try a Sterling. That'd be nice. A Rover 800 Sterling would be very nice. Polygon says the rarest car I saw was 1983 Ford Sierra 2.3 V6 gear, air conditioning, heated seats, electrical round windows, and wood trim on the doors. Yeah, the 2.3 Sierras are very rare. There's not an awful lot of those that were made, actually. You could get some nice options, rather like in somehow the kind of Mark 4 Fiesta. You could get air conditioning and things like that in that as well, and, you know, leather trim and things like that. But yeah, the Sierras, you could option those up nicely. Ford were selling loads of options for like a Sierra or a Granada at the time. Agent Barry says the Maestro Advantage I had was better than the SD3 and the R8 Rovers. I don't know. I've driven a Maestro Advantage. I think the SD3 is actually better than one of those. Maestros I like. I prefer the Montegos, to be honest. Montegos are even better. But the Advantage I drove, which was one of the only two left in the country, also was owned by a chap who has an SD3. And that SD3 was superb. It's somewhere around. I don't know who owns it now, but yeah, SD3s are lovely. I'd kind of like to own one of those, actually, in some ways. Obviously a Vanden Plas with a beige leather interior. Sean Cook says the Sierra and 405 built-in commentary were very good, and the Mark III Cavalier was very good too. I'm supposed to be going back to the Great British Car Journey at some point. I've been offered to go back there. It won't be for a couple of months yet, but there is a Mark III Cavalier they have, but it's a really basic one. I'm not even sure it has power steering. It says it's like a 1.6L or something. I'm quite tempted to have a go in that, actually. 405, I would like to have a go in the one that Arthur has, who lives up in Yorkshire. When it's actually on the road. I don't think it's on the road at the moment, the estate one that he has. That's very nice. Everything Cars said, how much could you get an Allegro for about 10 years ago? Well, I think, as far as I understand it, you could get an Allegro for like no budget reviews money about 10 years ago. You can't now. I asked Alex from Alex's Assets when I drove her lovely Series 1 Allegro with a Quartic steering wheel in blaze red, if you could get one for no budget reviews money anymore. I don't think you can. I really don't think you can. Certainly not one that's actually got an MOTs on the road. I don't think you can get one of those anymore for that kind of money. But certainly, yeah, 10 years ago, quite possibly. They've really sort of climbed in price. The Princesses in particular, in the past 25 years, have gone from like £1,500 cars to, you know, barely scraping in at under 5,000. They've massively increased in price for the best Princesses, and that one I saw yesterday was actually really nice. Right, do we have any more discussion about cars from the 1980s? There's obviously more we could actually say. Bodyguard says, I've never seen a Sierra of such high spec. I'll go back to 99 when I picked at scrapyards. This is the thing. This is why there aren't really so many of these cars left anymore. All the things, Cortinas, Cavaliers, Sierras, Astras, Belmonts, all that sort of stuff. They just disappeared in massive numbers. It's sort of like a Mark One Astra or a Belmont or something like that. They're just not around anymore. They rusted. They were just worth nothing. They were just to a penny. Like the early 2000s, Mark II Astras and Belmonts were worth just nothing at all. That's why they're the most stolen cars at the time. They really sort of weren't worth anything. And obviously everyone's nostalgic about them now. I think you can maybe pick up a Mark II Astra for no budget reviews money. You could certainly pick up a Mark III. Someone in the comments let me know if you could pick up a Mark II Astra for no budget reviews money. Agent Barry, that guy from SETI Alpha 5. A little off topic, my first novel will be published on 30th of June next year. Yes, I think you mentioned that, sir. That should be interesting. Sean Cook says, the Renault 9, the car of the year, I think it was 1982 that was car of the year, and the Renault 21. Yes, the 21s are very rare. When I was at primary school, a friend of mine, his parents had a 21 Savannah. I remember it very well, actually. I remember that, the 21 Savannah. And that was massive, actually. It's a huge car. I think it's the only car that I've ever known where the engine could be mounted kind of this way and this way. Very, very strange. The Renault Medallion, which was sold in North America, was like that too. Barry, do I still have the C70? The C70 is gone about 6 months ago, I think. Yeah, 6 months ago. Dry Boat says, have I ever driven a 14 or an 18 Renault? No, because I've never been offered one of those, actually. Chambers 101 says, good evening, sir. Good evening to you. I remember I saw a Renault 25 Turbo Baccara with a grey leather interior and blue piping. Really? Where'd you see that, sir? Sounds very nice. Right, any more 1980s car memories that anybody has for this evening? Oh, very good. Still up a lip. The Renault Fuego or the Espace? Yes, of course. First Espace launched, I think, in 1984. Came through, I think, it's 91, 92. Fuego, now those are very, very rare. Very rare. I don't think I've seen a Fuego in a long time. It's something you only see at a car show. You just don't see them in the wild at all. Polygon 2 says the same scrapyard in Derby, Albert Loom. Renault 25 Turbo Baccara. Agent Barry says, my dad had a Sierra 2-litre gear. Very nice. We love that car. What year was that then, sir? He traded in the Mark II Granada to get it. Yeah, funny thing was about the Mark II and Mark III Granadas is apart from the engine, I don't think the gearbox, I think just some of the engines were shared, like nothing else was. The Mark III Granada was essentially a bit like a big Sierra, whereas the Mark II and Mark I Granada were all on their own in terms of the engineering. And Mr. Coleman always says to me that the Mark II Granada was quite possibly the best car that Ford ever made, Ford of Europe. And he might actually be right about that, to be honest. He might well be right about that. Agent Barry says an 89 2-litre Sierra gear. Thing was, around that time, I think you get a 2-litre Pinto and a 2-litre twin-cam Sierra. The twin-cam engine was supposed to sort of replace the Pinto, but in some ways people say it didn't really do that. Chambers 101 says, a Range Rover 4-door, a classic. Well, sir, if you've watched today's video from Exbury, then you would see a classic Range Rover 4-door. It was a soft dash Vogue SE. That was very nice. We liked that. Sean Cook says the Citroen Visa was very underestimated. Yes. When I was younger, one of the people who looked after us had a Citroen Visa. It was a red one. don't see them anymore, do you? At all, you don't see those. They drove like a 205, says Sean. I've driven a couple of 205s, an automatic and a manual one. Yeah, I'd like to have a go in a Visa actually. Probably a later one. I prefer the later ones. Richard Howlett said, I hope I'll see Mark II Cavaliers and Mark I Astras on Saturday. I saw a Mark I Cavalier today, actually, in the video. It was the one I've seen before, actually. It's really weird when you go to the local shows. You do see the same cars over and over again at these local shows. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just yeah, you know, it's obviously, you know, people hear about shows and they come together. Yeah, Mark II Cavaliers, Mark I Astras. Mark I Astra on Saturday would be interesting, wouldn't it? People loved those Cavaliers and Astras, didn't they, back in the day? Amo Al says, have you ever driven a Seat Malaga? No, I've not even seen a Seat Malaga for a long time, 30 years possibly. Mark from Bad Book says the rare 1980s cars were the ordinary Lancia Delta. Yeah. I've only ever probably seen one or two of those normal spec Deltas, and the Lancia Y10 with the fire engine. Yeah, marketed as Lancia Y10 over here, but I think those were marketed as an Auto Bianchi in other markets. Steve Blip says the short wheelbase Suzuki Vitara 1.6. I had a Suzuki Vitara first generation right at the beginning of starting the channel. You actually see it in some of the very early videos, but I never had that on the road properly because it failed its MOT, and you know, that was really it. I sold it with no MOT and managed to get some money back for that. So I never sort of reviewed it. I just see it in some of the title sequences and things and other bits of the very early videos. Paulie Gartieri, Sport for Choice of 80s cars, early Rover 825i Sterling. It wasn't actually called the 825i Sterling. 825i was a trim level, then it was just called the Sterling. It was just called Rover Sterling, with the rear electric seats and a bit trip computer. Yeah, the 800 had a slightly different dash installed after 1988, but the early ones, certainly with the Sterlings, did have that trip computer, and yes, they had electrically adjustable seats in the back, like a Mark III Granada Scorpio. Sean Cook says, I've driven the Sierra and 2 litre Pinto and 2-litre twin cam. The Pinto was quite smooth and torquey, the twin cam was faster and more thirsty. Mr. Coleman doesn't really rate the twin cam engine particularly. I didn't find it a very good engine when I drove it. I find the car a bit difficult to drive personally with that engine. Yeah, I think I'd like to try a Sierra with maybe a Pinto or another engine in it, rather than that 2 litre. Even the instructor I went around with at Great British Car Journey, he kind of said, yeah, you know, that this isn't really the best spec for a Sierra. It's not really the best, but just one they've got. Which Steph, I drove a Classic, drove quite recently actually. I drove it a lot. Way before she did. Drove it in 2021 actually, but then she went there first ages before I ever did, so it doesn't really matter, does it? Mark from Bad Book says the Mark I Cavalier sports hatch you showed today was a very popular colour. Yeah, like a yellow with a sort of a yellow and brown check interior. James 101 says one of my favourites was the Mark I Panda 4x4. Yeah, not many of those left now. Still it says V205 GTI. Yeah. I'm surprised I didn't see one of those there today, actually. Sean Cook says the police in Northern Ireland use the twin cam to the Sierras. I wonder if the car that's used in the title sequence for the bill in the 1990s was a 2-litre twin cam Sierra. It might have been. I don't know. A lot of you will remember that Sierra from right at the beginning of the episodes of the bill in the 90s. Stiff Upper Lip says, Sean Cook speaking to Stiff Upper Lip, the Suzuki Vitara was cool. Yes, it was, wasn't it? I suppose back in the day. And then, oh hello, Mark from Bad Book says, I had a 1.8 LX Sierra CVH and a GLSI 2-litre twin cam. I love both of them, much to Mr. Coleman's discussed. Mr. Coleman does not like the 1.8 CVH, and he does not like the full twin cam engine. So I'm afraid they are both to his disgust. He would say just buy the Pinto, is what he would say, I think, to me. Right, do we have anything else, or shall we call it a day there? Right, I think that is enough for this evening. Let me know somewhere in the comments if you want to see another one of these soon. So thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching this Slightly Less Professional live stream number 47. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video in the comment below, and we shall see you again soon for more, well, rambling and incoherent discussion.